the best of Money Matters.
Market View on Money FM 89.3.
That's right, you're tuning in to Money FM 89.3. Time now for Market View with me, Chua Tian Tian, where we take you through how the Singapore stock market closed for the day, the biggest movers, sectors, and of course the companies to watch. But as always, a quick recap of some key movements. Well, Singapore shares opened lower today as all eyes remained on heightened tensions in the Middle East, with the US now involved in the Israel-Iran air war. So the Straits Times Index was down 0.9% at 3,847 points in early trade after around 80 million securities changed hands in the broader market. Now let's take you through the closing numbers. The STI closed down 0.11%. We're looking at 3,879 points. In terms of value turnover, that's 1.28 billion Sing dollars. Gainers trailed losers 217 versus 269. Top advances for today we've got for you SGX, Plato Capital and Venture Core. And top decliners we have for you GMHUSD, Jardine Cycle and Carriage and Semco Industries. Now in terms of companies to watch, we have OCBC because yesterday the lender said that it has committed more than 11 billion ringgit or 3.3 billion Sing dollars in financing to support businesses in the Johor-Singapore Special Economic Zone since 2024. Now meanwhile, from Singapore's inflation nudging back down in May to the long-awaited launch of Tesla's robotaxi service, we've got more economic and corporate headlines in focus. And also on deck, more on Asian market movements today given the situation in the Middle East. So let's break them down with Chin Hui Leong, co-founder of The Smart Investor. He joins me on the line. Chin, welcome back to the show.
Glad to be back.
Great to have you. And Chin, let's start with the US or Asia this time around, because the US launched strikes against 3 nuclear facilities in Iran over the weekend. How far is this a surprise for global markets, and how did Asian markets react today? How far are markets pricing in a possible retaliation by Iran for now?
Yeah, so I don't think anyone wants to see an escalation in all this trade tit-for-tat battle. And it does seem like the markets, at least, don't seem to be reacting, whether it's oil prices or stock markets in Asia, right? As you mentioned, the STI is just down very slightly. I think people are also watching the Straits of Hormuz, which Iran is threatening to block. But then again, that would likely hurt countries like Qatar, which is a major supplier for LNG, or liquefied natural gas. And also China, which relies on a lot of imports from the Middle East for oil, right? So, but then again, if you're an investor, I don't think anyone in their right mind would hope for more bombings to keep oil prices high, right? This is not a strategy. And I think for investors, you should look for something which is more sustainable rather than war.
Okay. And if we could go back to the Singapore stock market as usual, Chin, how far did the STI track regional movements, and any surprises if we look at the biggest movers and the sectors that they lie in today?
Yeah, so there are, of course, gainers and losers, slightly more losers than gainers. But when I look at it, I didn't detect any a trend, whether it's banks or REITs and so on. I did see Samcorp and Seatrium both down, which is interesting given oil prices could be going up. And I do see ThaiBev going up today, but then there's no major news except for last Friday's information, I think, presentation which they did. So nothing really which catches my eye at the moment.
I see. And if we zoom in on some of the companies to watch for today, Chin, we've got OCBC, because OCBC said yesterday that it has committed more than 11 billion Malaysian ringgit or 3.3 billion Sing dollars in financing to support businesses in the Johor-Singapore Special Economic Zone since 2024. But really, what does this move mean for investors of OCBC, though, and how have they reacted to the news with their money thus far?
So to give everyone just a bit of context, OCBC loans were at 315 billion in 2024. And, this commitment is roughly about 3.3 billion, right? So it's sort of like a bit more than 1% of what they did in 2024. So it's not a sizable commitment in my eyes. And secondly, I think it's not just about the size of the loan. in Malaysian ringgit, of course, it's significant, right? It's 11 billion, but also how well they are able to earn from this loan, which I think is the more pertinent question for the bank.
Okay, and if I could get your take on this, so how well do you think they can, how well do you think these loans can perform then?
I think part of it is not really up to them because it also depends on the interest rates, right? So if interest rates fall, for example, then they will earn less, right, from their net interest margin. So there is sort of a dynamic between the interest which they charge and the amount of loans which they can drive, right? And these two are somewhat interconnected because if interest rates are lower, there might be more loans. If interest rates are higher, there'll be less loans. So there's sort of like an offsetting effect between the two, and you've got to see what the net effect is from this.
I suppose there are a lot of moving parts as well. But another counter to watch for today, Chin, is Fuyu Corporation, which is a components manufacturer. Now, on Friday, it said that 4 proposed directors have been assessed by an independent party who made no findings against their suitability for the role. Now, this actually follows the resignation of 3 directors earlier in June, which left the group with only 1 director on its board. How would you read into the move, and really how far can this development help investors gain confidence or regain confidence in the firm?
Yeah, so a little bit of history. I actually visited Fuyu's manufacturing plant more than 20 years ago. And I do remember even back then, I was thinking that this is such a difficult business to run, right? There's a lot of machinery, there's a lot of capital commitment and so on. And indeed, it has been a tough business. For the last 2 years, revenue has been cut in half. I think they are currently unprofitable and they have negative free cash flow. Perhaps the only saving grace is they still have a fair amount of cash, close to 56 million with no debt, right? So I do not know whether this, let's call it boardroom drama, is helping. I think there's a fair amount of uncertainty. So I think shareholders will be looking for answers, especially they have an AGM in June 27th, which I think all eyes and questions will be asked then.
Okay. And staying in Singapore, Chin, let's talk about inflation. Singapore's inflation nudged back down in May, driven by slower price increases in food and private transport. So if we look at core inflation, that's at 0.6%, in line with private sector economists' median forecast in a Bloomberg poll, also lower than the previous month's reading of 0.7%. How would you read into the numbers, and really what do they mean for the dollar's near then?
Yep. So for me, I don't think there's much we can read too deeply, given the quarter-and-quarter difference is somewhat small, right? I think that the bigger question is really about oil prices and how food prices may actually increase in the future. And I think there's this environment of uncertainty. I meant to say tariffs, not food prices, sorry. And I think this is the part where whether it's the US Fed or the Singapore government is concerned about, there's fair amount of uncertainty. And nobody really knows how inflation will move in the future, right? From what I can see over the past month, the exchange rate, the Singapore dollar has strengthened against the Japanese yen and the Malaysian ringgit. And that could be why people are traveling more during the school holidays.
Okay, I hope you get to travel as well during the school holidays, Chin. Okay, now if you're just tuning in, we're now in conversation with Chin Hui Leong, co-founder of The Smart Investor. Well, Chin, around the world, earlier we talked about the Strait of Hormuz, but also aside from shipping lanes and oil freight, commercial airlines around the world, they are weighing on how long to actually suspend Middle East flight because the airspace from Iran to Iraq and to the Mediterranean has largely been empty of commercial traffic for 10 days since Israel began strikes on Iran. Now, these are usually very resilient hubs like Dubai, Qatar's Doha. How significant would the escalating conflict in the Middle East then be for global airlines, the likes of your SIA, Emirates, Qatar, British Airways, given Middle East's status as a gateway to Europe?
Yeah, so I think at the moment, given the uncertain situation, safety trumps business, definitely, right? Everyone's definitely prioritizing safety. From what I know, SIA flights to Dubai have been suspended until Wednesday. Could be prolonged, and I think that there's this environment of uncertainty to how long this is going to drag on, right? Because there's the thing about war is there's always tit for tat. Nobody is going to end up happy, and in the end, someone's unhappy, even when it so-called ends, right? So that's the danger of war. It just escalates into this, you hit me, I hit you back, and then it never ends from there, right? Because someone is going to be unhappy in the end.
So you're saying that there could be some permanent damage to the aviation sector. Is it right to infer that way?
Not.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And further away, Chin, this one, we've been waiting for this piece of news for quite some time already. Tesla, they're deploying a small group of self-driving taxis picking up paying passengers in Austin, Texas. Now, CEO Elon Musk announced the robotaxi launch. Social media's influencers, they're posting videos of their first rides. Now, this is a business that Musk sees as crucial to Tesla's financial future. But do you think, given the scale of the, you call that the pilot or trial, do you think this can revive investors' confidence in the firm, given also competition from your other players like Waymo and Zoox, and also the competitive landscape in China if we look at AV driving autonomous vehicles?
Yep. So let me talk about the broader trend of autonomous vehicles before going to Tesla.
Sure.
Right? So I've been following this trend since 2010 because I've been a shareholder for Google, and I'm really excited by this trend of autonomous vehicles, right? Because it was Google who had, in my eyes, the audacity. Back then it was crazy to think that cars could drive themselves, but it was Google who had the audacity to attempt self-driving cars back in 2010, and more importantly, stick to it when it was unprofitable and unfeasible for so long, right? And one of the driving reasons is because there's this very startling statistic that in the U.S., there's somewhere between 30,000 to 40,000 people who die on the roads every year. Right? I mean, think about how horrifying that statistic is, which happens every year, which somehow people have sort of gotten used to and considered it like a non-issue, right? But it's horrifying to think that so many people just die on the roads every year. And, that's not all. That if you go to YouTube and search for this title called Self-Driving Car Test, Steve Mahan, M-A-H-A-N, he was passenger number 1 back in 2013 to take Google's self-driving car. And the magic about this ride was Steve was blind, right? And he was able to take this car without having his hands on the wheel, and he would go where he wanted to go. So, there's so much potential for self-driving car, which is why I'm so excited about it. And really today it feels a lot more closer to reality, right? We have Waymo, which is under Alphabet or Google, which is doing 1 million or more than 1 million paid rides every month, right? They are coming to Tokyo, which is a bit closer to where we are. There are rumors of Baidu expanding its fleet to Singapore and Malaysia, which is making me even more excited. And this could be huge for Singapore because I found out that about 12% of Singapore's land is actually used for roads, right? So if autonomous vehicles are able to reduce the need for roads, then it could be hugely significant for Singapore. Now, coming to Tesla, right? Sorry for going a big round.
No worries at all.
But I think it's still very early days. The test, from what I understand, is very controlled. It's dual fence, so you can only go to certain places. And it's not entirely driverless per se, because to me it's more like supervised, right? There's no driver on the seat, but there is a supervisor on the passenger seat. So it's not quite there yet, right? And for Tesla, I think frankly they need to win, right? I don't think anyone can say with a straight face when you look at Tesla shares and say that they're supported by fundamentals. Right now, shares are supported by promises, right? They are trading at 130 times free cash flow, and there's this promise that their full self-driving or FSD will rapidly scale and bring in billions in revenue, right? And the real question is really how long it takes before this promise becomes reality. So I think that they really need to win. Yeah.
Okay, especially in line with what's going on in the industry with Waymo already, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay, lots to watch. Indeed, Chin, we shall see how that rollout goes. That was Chin Hui Leong, co-founder from The Smart Investor. Thank you so much for joining us on Money FM 89.3.
Before acting on the information on Money FM, please consider if it's suitable for your own investment objectives, financial situation, and risk tolerance.